Welcome to episode 2 of the Going for Broke Outdoors podcast, a podcast by an outdoorsman for other outdoorsmen. I'm your host, Jeremy Gillespie. In today's episode, we catch up with Jordan Kurkowski. Jordan is a certified big buck slayer from Wisconsin with some out-of-the-box tactics. I first learned about Jordan through Dan Infalt's Hunting Beast forum when one of his first posts showed pictures of a pile of trophy-class bucks. Jordan's impressive collection of bucks includes several Pope and Young caliber deer and one Boone and Crockett, all of which have been taken inside of 20 yards on public land, from the ground, and several with a recurve bow. In today's podcast, we discuss Jordan's approach to ground hunting setups, preseason and in-season scouting, trail camera use, observation sits, and a whole lot more. Today's podcast is brought to you by Stealth Outdoors, the tree stand silencing store. Stealth Outdoors manufactures a variety of tree stand silencing equipment aimed at the mobile hunter, including climbing stick wraps, cam buckle covers, platform cable wraps, and more. I've used stealth strips on my climbing sticks and tree stands since 2014, and I can personally attest to the durability and functionality of the product. On top of that, Stealth Outdoors provides world-class customer service and ships products quickly. Visit www.stealthoutdoors.com for more information. Today's podcast is also brought to you by Snark Media Agency, a digital-first agency focused on custom web design, specialized photo and video creation, and all things marketing. Visit www.snarkmediaagency.com to establish or expand your online presence. Web, photo, video, Snark Media Agency. Today's podcast is also brought to you by Ideal Northern Edge Food Plot Mixes. Ideal Northern Edge has carefully created a variety of seed mixes and minerals to cover all of your food plot planting needs. A bright color coating on the seeds provides visual contrast against tilled soil and ensures optimum seed coverage and density for your next food plot planting. Visit www.idealnorthernedge.com for more information. I'm really excited to talk to today's guest, so let's go ahead and get Jordan on the line. All right, I'm here with Jordan Kurkowski, the man, the myth, the Marshbuster. Just wanted to start out this podcast on a little bit different note, Jordan, and have you tell me the story of your favorite buck. And specifically, I want to start out by discussing how you ended up in the area that this buck lived. Was it cyber scouting or previous history, maybe shining, boots on the ground scouting, or a combination or something else?
Actually, how I got up on this buck was a combination of all that stuff. I had seen him a lot the year before that I ended up shooting him. I was glassing him right before dark in a public bean field, and I actually ended up having him about 30 yards opening week of bow hunting. It was 2015, and I was not expecting him to come from where he came from, and he totally busted me. But after I first saw him, I would go middle of the day and walk the fields and try to find his track and see if I could figure out where exactly he was coming from, because every night I would see him, he came from a different area. But I would check maps religiously, trying to figure out what I could see. I would go shining. I do that quite a bit. And after 2015, I never saw him again after that one encounter. But I drove around the public marsh that he was in after season. It was late January. It was cold. And I'm going to drive around and see what kind of deer made it through the season. And sure enough, he was standing right next to the road, pretty close to where I was glassing him all summer. I thought, well, holy crap, he made it. So that's what I'm going to focus on for next year. And I did. I wanted to shoot him. He didn't score huge. I think he ended up like 144 and change. But he was just a big, old, mature deer. And I walked the edge of the field again to see where he was feeding all winter. And he kept coming out of a spot that made no sense to me.
Why is that?
He was just coming out of this is just a big area of cattails that goes on for probably, I'm going to say at least 1,300 yards. There's nothing out there. There's no trees or anything. It just goes all the way to this river. And what I could not figure out the year before was, because there is a couple sections of dogwood and some smaller willow trees out in those cattails, but there was never his sign by any of them. There's always does and smaller bucks. So anyway, as I went in that next spring, winter scouting, and I came up to this spot, it was probably a foot higher in elevation than anything else in this whole section. Sure enough, I started finding all these beds everywhere in like a probably 20-yard circle, and they were big beds. And what I noticed, I've seen it a lot. I don't know how much other guys notice it, but there was in the beds, there was sections of cattails that were all tore up and they're all twisted and knotted up. And what I've noticed over the years is that is a buck rub in the cattails. A lot of guys don't believe me, but that's what it is, because they're all tore up and they're twisted. And you can see, if you look deeper into everything, you can see where they dug their hooves in the ground, their rake and stuff. And I'm like, well, this is him. It's got to be him. And I don't think he used that area all year. There's actually another buck I am currently trying to figure out what he's doing right now. Same age and rack and everything. And it seems like these deer are a half mile away all summer and early fall. And I think they don't go out into that section until there's some pressure. Okay. So that's what I'm trying to figure out. So that's the trail camera I just hung about a half hour ago. I hung that to see if I can figure out what this deer's doing. Anyways, so it was a Saturday. I used to be on a fire department. We had fire training that morning, and then after training we had an actual fire call, and went to that, came back. The Badger football game was on. I stopped at home to eat something quick before hunting, and I fell asleep in the chair. I woke up at like 3:30. Thought, oh crap, I only got 2 hours. And the wind was pretty iffy for this spot I had found, because the access to it was almost blowing straight to where it had to be. And I didn't feel good about it. I wasn't even thinking of hunting there, but as I got to the public marsh, there were trucks and vehicles everywhere, and I had no one to blame but myself for getting out there late. Anyways, I went back there. I'm like, well, screw it. I'm going to try it. What's the worst that could happen, right? And I could hear something coming. It was about an hour before dark yet. Heard something coming. I got ready, and this buck comes out at like 10 yards, and he is totally broadside from me.
That's the one you're after.
This is the one, yes. Totally broadside, and I'm looking at him, and I'm like, man, I don't know. I don't know if that's big enough or not. It doesn't look that big. And he kind of quartered his head towards me, and all of a sudden I saw he was like 20 inches wide, and it's actually like a 250-pound deer. I'm like, oh, crap, he's so big. His body was so big, it threw me off, even that close.
Wow.
Because when they're coming in, the way I hunt on the ground, I usually try not to look at them too hard, because I get nervous, and they look at me, and it's over, just like that. So I'm like, oh, crap, I should have shot him 5 seconds ago. So I drew back, and I shot right over the top of him. I could not believe it.
At 10 yards? 15 yards?
Yeah, 10 yards. Yep, and I practiced religiously out to like 80 all summer, even though I never shoot that far, but I like shooting far. It's fun, and make close shots easy, but I was so caught off guard that I totally messed him.
Now, was this a compound or a recurve? Because you shoot both, right?
Yeah, this was actually a compound, and so now here's the other part of the story. Earlier in the year, it was the very last day of September. I was with the recurve, and I got home from work at about 4 o'clock, and there's a big storm about to come in. And I had a spot on the other end of this marsh where there was a very big one hanging out all summer, and I was pretty sure I knew where he was. Well, anyways, it came in, and I had a 5-yard shot with my recurve, and he would have been Boone and Crockett for sure. I ended up losing that deer.
Oh, man.
I think I one-lunged it. I thought I drilled him because I was just kind of crouched over, and he was coming straight at me. He turned to his left, perfect broadside, and I just kind of rose out of the sawgrass. and I thought I drilled him. He tucked his tail and kind of hopped into some red brush, and I'm like, oh my God, I just killed the biggest deer of my life, and he's dead right there. Not the case. We
Yeah.
chased him. We let him sit for about 5 hours. I ended up looking for him for 3 days. Never found anything. He kept making circles. He was bleeding. It was good blood, but I think I must have barely touched the lung. And I lost a lot of confidence and hope and everything after that. I was so mad at myself. I did not bow hunt again until probably October 20th. So about 20 days. And I wasn't even going to hunt the rest of the year. And, guys, some of my buddies are like, you got to move on. It happens, you'll bounce back from it. You always get one. I'm like, yeah, whatever. I don't even want to hear it.
Yeah, man, I've been there, and people say if they've never missed a buck, you're either a liar or you haven't bow hunted very long, because sooner or later, unfortunately, I think it happens to everybody.
Exactly. And it's a miserable feeling. That was the first time it's happened to me. And I was sick. I still think about it, just how it played out. Right now, thinking about it makes me sick. I'm like, how did I screw that up? Yeah, so anyways, back to the buck I ended up shooting. I had the compound, and that was kind of another reason why when he stepped out, I wasn't even thinking about shooting him because of what I had already shot and lost. I wanted something big.
Right.
And anyways, he turned his head, and I saw that I probably should have shot him right away. And I missed him, and I'm thinking, you got to be kidding me. And he trotted about 10 yards and stood there, and he's looking back at me, trying to figure me out. I'm like, well, I got to put another arrow in right now because he's going to take off and whatever. So I knocked another arrow, and all I could see was from his face to about mid-shoulder. As I'm coming to full draw, I'm like, well, all I got is neck shot. That's what I'm taking. I'm taking it right now. And I shot, and I hit him, and he started running up to a plowed field, which I was surprised about. So I immediately just started running up so I could look through the binoculars. And I actually watched him drop after about 80 yards.
Oh, wow.
And I'm starting to fist pump and stuff, and just like that, he gets back up and he starts running again. I thought, you gotta be kidding me. He ran about another 200 yards through this plowed field, and then he dropped again. I thought, all right, now he's done. And I was starting to text my buddy, and I looked at him. He got up again, ran over the hill, and out of sight. I thought, this can't be happening. 2 in 1 year. And I threw my compound about 20 yards. I was so mad. I could not believe it. I'm like, I just put a hole in that thing's neck, and I could see it squirting out. And that thing is running. And what was scary was he was kind of starting to head towards a little chunk of private, and those guys don't necessarily like people coming to look for deer on their land and stuff.
Sure.
So I was getting nervous, and I called a couple buddies. They came over, and we were talking about it. And in this plowed field, I mean, it was bleeding so bad, or so good, I should say. You could actually step in the pools of blood in this plowed field, make like the squishy noise of like if it rains really hard.
Oh, wow.
Now, how is this deer even going this far? We debated letting them sit. The coyotes are really bad in this area, and usually if you let one sit overnight, the coyotes have them destroyed almost every time out here. And my main goal was, I just want to follow the blood through this plowed field because that's going to be dried up and we're not going to see it tomorrow. I want to follow this till he hits the CRP. And we did, and he ended up being dead 20 yards inside of it.
How far do you think from the shot to where he finally went down? How many yards would you guess?
We figured it was about 900 yards, and I've never – that's the first 3 times further than any deer I've ever shot has gone. And I actually was using a 2-inch 3-blade Grim Reaper mechanical, and I put like a 5-inch hole in its neck.
So I want to tell a similar story, and this is something that happened. Some buddies and I went to Ohio for an out-of-state hunt in 2016, and one of my friends actually shot a deer with mechanical in the neck, and it's almost exactly like you described. So maybe this will be good for some people that are listening. Same thing, tons of blood. We tracked it, GPS, and we kept thinking, like, how are we not finding this? At this point, we didn't know that he had shot it in the neck. All we knew is that there was tons of blood everywhere, and we just kept tracking farther and farther. And it ended up being about an 800-yard track job, but it was just a straight neck shot. So it's good to know, I think they die. They obviously bleed a ton when you hit them in the right spot in the neck, but they can go a long ways.
Yeah, it was. I honestly could not believe it because I've shot a couple other ones at the time in the same spot, and man, if they go 60 yards, and that was with like a fixed head, a thunder head, which is way smaller, and I don't know what your scenario was, but I was kind of thinking about it. I missed the deer the first shot, and he was on edge, and he was looking at me. He knew something was up. I don't know if his adrenaline was that strong or if he had that much of a will to live. We ended up doing a tooth analysis of him because I was curious. He had a big black head and just a huge round body. He ended up being 7.5 years old.
Oh, wow.
And I don't know if he was just, I'm not dying, or if his adrenaline was pumping for me, or a combination, or, the hole in the neck, it's crazy. It's crazy how tough them animals are.
Yeah, it really is. The will to live is strong for sure.
It humbles a guy.
Well, I want to ask you a few follow-up questions based on what you said there about your story. And the first thing is, you mentioned walking around looking for this buck's track in the different areas that he came out of. And to me, I think tracks are one of the things that are really important and maybe not as practiced as they should be. So was there anything specific about this buck's track that let you know this is the buck I'm after? Like size, shape, spread, stride, any of that stuff?
Yeah, there is, and it's going to probably throw some people off guard, especially I think I've shot in a couple that dressed over like 210. I think he was like 212 dressed the next day, which is pretty good size for around here, especially these public deer get pushed around a lot and they're always running. And but anyways, he had a pretty small track. You hear a lot of like 3.5, 4 finger wide track, and his hooves were probably only 3 fingers wide, but the thing was built like a Sherman tank.
Right.
But I picked up on it because if I wouldn't have seen exactly where he was standing and then went and looked, I would have never believed it. I would have either thought it was a big doe or maybe a 2-year-old buck.
Were the tracks deeper? Or I know a lot of guys say especially a big body buck like that will have a wider front stance. Did you notice anything like that, or a longer stride or anything?
He did have that, and that was the only reason that I could pick out his track and separate it from like the bigger does and the younger bucks, because I could just see how much more splayed it was.
Okay.
And like I said, if I wouldn't have actually seen where he walked, I would have never guessed. I would think that deer would have a hoof print the size of your hand, and it didn't. So I've been walking around with a couple different guys on the beast, Joel Rentmeester and stuff, and we're always looking at tracks and going, this ain't very big. Like, I don't know, man, because they're like people. They all got different characteristics. And I shot another one, a bigger buck that had small tracks. Maybe it's just a gene of around my area. It could very well be, but
I know I've read articles from Joe Elsinger, Joe Ree on the Hunting Beast, and he talks about tracks quite a bit, and I think he's seen the same thing. Some of the big bucks have smaller hooves, some of them have bigger. Just goes back to there's no always and never in whitetail deer hunting, I don't think.
Right, 100%.
One other thing I heard you mention in there, and I want to talk about this, is when you finally, sounds like, honed in on that bedding area, you said it was about a foot higher than everything around it. How big was that actual area? Was it like 50 yards by 50 yards, or small, big? Describe that area a little bit.
It wasn't that big at all. And I would say for guys listening, I actually have not hunted out of state much at all, but like Wisconsin, a typical state public area parking lot, you can fit like 3 or 4 trucks in it. That was about it, but there was 6 or 7 beds in it. And I remember finding it, and I took a lot of pictures of it because you could tell he would move, even though it was solid cattails, but it was a little higher, so what he was laying on was never damp or wet. But he had different beds in there for every different wind there could be, and every one of them was laid out perfect. And every one of them had a couple, I guess, stalks of cattails tore up right by them. It's a pretty cool setup, and there's usually a buck using it every year because ever since I found it, I walk it every spring just to see. And yeah, so it's not big, and I think it's solely the best buck in that area's spot.
Yeah, it sounds like a pretty good spot. Something else you mentioned, and I think I've only heard this maybe one other time, and probably pretty interesting to a lot of people, was the knotted cattails. And I've heard it in a little different context, is if you have a buck with a big rack walking through cattails, a lot of times they will pick up cattails on their antlers as they're coming through, and then when they bed, they'll drop them or shake them off. And you mentioned you thought they're rubbing in the cattails. Is there something, was the area right around that higher spot where their cattails broke off right there that makes you think that?
Yeah, I've noticed that too, where there's just clumps of them laying there, or it almost looks like, if you put it if you're walking these trails and you think of a deer's height and where his head would be, where it almost looks like about 3.5, 4 feet off the ground, it's kind of plowed off a little more on the sides of the trail. But no, what I'm talking about is it's really hard to describe. It's hard to describe to people without showing them a picture because there's a lot of things I say and people think I'm nuts for saying it, but I spend a lot of time out here and I see it, and it adds up after a while, and that makes sense. But it's almost like it looks like if you would grab a couple stalks of cattails and you would just twist them up, and it's almost like putting it in a pretzel, but it's usually not actually in a knot, but it's all shredded about 2.5 feet up, and then the rest of it's laying down. You can see it's just been destroyed. And that was in this particular bedding area. It was like that in every bed. And then where I know where the does and the smaller bucks usually bed in there, it was on the outskirts of that. So I could tell there was something big in there that was kind of always monitoring the other spot with the does and smaller bucks too.
That's definitely interesting. That's not, like I said, that's not something that I've seen a ton, but that's a great detail to help somebody pick up if there's a buck using that area or that specific trail or that specific bed. Another kind of key to look for. So 2 more things on this story. You mentioned on the day that you shot this deer that the wind was almost terrible for the access. So, without giving your spot away, north, south, east, west, or whatever, you can just say like a general direction. But from where you had to access to the bed, like if you can describe it in terms of a clock, like how far off was the wind? Like 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock?
Yeah. I'll tell you because I don't care. My access was from the north, and the bedding spot was almost straight south of my parking location, but probably 3/4 to a mile from the truck. So I wasn't terribly worried about that. But to the southeast a ways is another parking lot, and guys come in from that way too. And I didn't have much time, and I didn't want to screw someone else's hunt up either. So I didn't want to go way around. Most guys are hunting up in the high grounds where they're probably not going to see anything anyways, but I know how discouraging it is when it's getting that last hour and a half and someone walks through. So I pretty much went straight for it. I kind of went I veered to the east a little bit. I guess it must have been just enough or whatever, but the wind was almost dead wrong for my access, and I did not have many other options to get in. But, I mean, he was bedding there for a reason. He could definitely smell anyone coming from that way.
Yeah, sometimes you just got to take a chance and get in there.
Yep, and anyone that knows me knows I have no problem blowing a spot or whatever, because a lot of times, Monday through Friday, by the time I get home from work, even early season, if I have an hour to get back in and set up before dark, I honestly don't care. I'll go for it if I feel like it's going to happen. It's pretty much what I did, and it ended up working out.
I have, I'd say, really aggressive hunting tactics, tendencies too. Like I'm not scared to mess deer up, and mostly because I'm hunting a lot of different properties. So if I mess one up, I'm not too worried about it. Sounds like it's the same way for you. So maybe talk about or tell people your experiences with, let's say you're on a good deer and you do blow it out. How often would you say that you see that deer in that general area? Let's maybe not that specific bed, but maybe on that same piece of property or the neighboring piece, because personally I believe they don't go that far that often unless they're repeatedly harassed, 3, 4, 5 times. And what have you seen with that?
Yeah, I would agree with that. If I jump a good one or blow a sit and I was close or I saw him or I heard one come from where the biggest, baddest buck in that area should be, I will usually get right back in there as soon as I can and readjust, set up maybe 50 yards in a different direction or to the side, because I like you said, I don't think they go very far, or if anywhere, the first one or two times you jump them. I mean, they're in that area because that's their area and they survive and they know it.
Right. It's worked for years. Why would they abandon it right away? Last thing with your story, and I was, not being the ethics police here, but I was a little surprised with the neck shot. Not a shot I would necessarily take on purpose, but it sounds like you've made a few with the bow. So was that deer? Was it head on, quartering to, quartering away? And is there a specific spot on the neck you're aiming for if you have to take a neck shot with a bow?
Yeah, I know. I'll probably get some heat from it. I usually do around home even, but when he trotted up that little ways, he stopped almost broadside, and then he turned hardcore looking at me, and all I could see was the crease. Like if you're skinning out a buck, you kind of know the layout of its neck and the meat that surrounds the esophagus and stuff. And I put my pin on it, and I thought about it for a second. I'm like, yep, I am killing him right now, and I let the arrow fly.
You're aiming pretty much well, if you're looking head on at a deer, left to right, you're aiming for the center line then.
Well, no, not necessarily, because I want to hit one of the two jugulars running up and down.
Okay.
So I usually kind of pick a side of this is another thing. It's kind of hard to describe without pictures, but if you can kind of imagine where his esophagus is running down, I usually try to go just to one side or the other.
And for people listening, you hunt almost exclusively off the ground, right? So this is a ground level shot?
Yes, it was. And I would never take that shot from a tree stand, because you like with the neck shot, I want to hit the main artery, but I still want to get penetration into the cavity too. So I imagine where the arrow's going to hit, and I still want to get in and hit a lung or something too. And I used to have a golden retriever that I bought her for pheasant hunting, and she was really good, but she would not bring a bird back to me. And I ended up training her to track deer, and she was really good at it. Actually, she still is. I just don't take her that much. But there was a lot of times where someone would call me, hey, I shot this buck. And I'd always ask the string questions, what time, where. Were you in a stand or whatever? Where'd you shoot them? And every time we went for a deer that someone tried shooting them head on from a tree stand, we never ever found it. Never once. So I wouldn't take that from a tree stand, but if I'm eye level with it and I'm pretty confident I'll get penetration. That I'll do it every time.
Another thing, and I think I read this on the Hunting Beast, it sounds like most of your shots, or maybe all of your shots from what I read, are 20 yards and under, and I think that's important too. That's probably not a shot you're making at 30 or 40 yards.
Yep. I other than with a gun, I don't think I've ever shot a buck past 15 yards, 15, 20.
I think that's going to surprise a lot of people.
Yeah, the closest one was 3 steps. That was pretty neat.
Yeah.
That's what I try to go for. And
So for people that don't know you, and that's a great story, by the way, and one of the reasons I was real interested in talking to you is you hunt almost exclusively or maybe totally off the ground, and you're hunting these marshes in cattails or swamps almost all the time, correct? And one of the things I wanted to find out is, once you've found a bedding area or a trail in the cattails, how do you set up? And that was one of my questions is are you walking down deer trails and then breaking off into the cattails, or are you setting right up in the trail? Like, kind of describe your setup once you've found a bedding area and how far off the trail, if you're getting off it, you want to be.
all right, yeah. So when I'm doing my spring scouting, I am always, once I find a bedding area, I am backtracking and doing like a full 360 around the whole thing to find the best setup. And a lot of times it's right in the cattails or right on the edge of it, maybe in some brush in the sawgrass before it transitions to the cattails. It depends on how far it is from the bedding, because I like to be really close. I like to hear them get up and everything. But if I'm in the cattails themselves, I will generally walk down the same trail I'm expecting them to come from. And then once I'm about 100 yards, 150 yards from where I think, or I know the bedding is, then I will try to sidetrack through the cattails and maybe hit a side trail. And then I'll cut back around onto the expected exit route. And I don't do much. I know some guys go in there and they bust off cats and have 3 shooting lanes and stuff like that. Usually what I will do, and I usually set up within like 5 to 10 yards of the actual trail, I'll make one window. Say I'm facing the trail perpendicular, like a 90-degree. I'm looking straight at the trail.
Right. So the trail's at your 12 o'clock.
Yep. I will make a small little window just with my hands, maybe a foot wide at the most, at say 10 o'clock. Just so when I hear one coming, I can get full draw when I'm pretty sure he's close. Full draw if I have the compound. And then I can just see him. And then my shooting lane is going to actually be about 2 to 3, about 2 o'clock. I want to shoot them when they're past me, because when I first started doing that, I would make a window at 9 o'clock. I'd make one at 10 o'clock, 11, make one at 12 o'clock, because I wanted to see everything that's going on. And it didn't matter if it was a fawn or a spike, they would look immediately. And then here I sit. And with the compound, you got to be full draw before you see them. And here it's a spike or a 2-year-old buck that you don't want to shoot or whatever, and they're sitting there staring at you, and you can hear something back 50 yards, and that's probably the target buck. And then this little one boogers out and goes back when on a blue your whole night. And that was kind of a reason why I switched to a recurve too. Even once I stopped making huge holes to see and to shoot, because with the recurve you can pretty much just pull it back once once you see them and shoot. You don't have to be at full draw for a minute or two if something else busts you.
When you're at the 2 o'clock window, that's mostly to keep yourself hidden, or do you prefer the quartering away shot, or both of those reasons?
It's mainly so I can stay hidden.
Do you feel like once they walk past you at, let's say, the 12 o'clock, that their eyes are focused forward and you can move more once they're past you?
Yeah, I mean, that's the goal. With anything, that it doesn't always go as planned, but I'd like them to. I mean, even if they stop at 12 o'clock and they get nervous, if I hear them start walking again, then I know it's game on and they're comfortable and whatever. But usually, too, I will, when I'm kneeling on the ground, my body is probably facing 3 o'clock the whole time. I'm facing almost straight away from where they're coming from, so I don't have to move when I draw back and shoot, if that makes sense.
No, that makes a lot of sense. And I don't know if you listened to the first podcast, but when I talked to Ryan Anderson, that was one of his big points that he made on ground hunting was you have to position your body like 90 degrees off from where you expect the shot. So if you expect to shoot at 12, face your chest and your knees at 3, because then you can just draw off your strong, this is assuming you're right-handed. You can just shoot off your strong side without having to move at all then, your body or your chest or anything.
Yep, exactly. And then you can shoot at 9 o'clock if you have to too, and that's happened to me enough also when I'm not actually in the cattails or when I'm right on the outside edge of them, it just tucked away in a little 2-foot tall shrub. That way you can, I mean, if you hear something coming, you can look back and maybe face the bull that way if you know it's going to be too open to spin around and just drill them right away as soon as you see them. I like to be drawn back before I see them because it usually happens pretty freaking fast.
I don't ground hunt much, but I did shoot 2 deer from the ground this year, and I think that's a big takeaway for guys that tree stand hunt that want to ground hunt. I think when to draw is way more important on the ground, and if you can and you think you can hold it, like you never know what a deer is going to do, obviously, but if you hear one coming, it's a great idea to get drawn back and ready where you think it's going to come out before you ever even see it.
Yeah, exactly. That is what I tried doing. I tried being ready so the minute it stops out, in case he does see me, I can take a shot if I got it. And usually I take the very first shot I get at him. I don't wait for him to go past me or anything. If I got a shot right away, I'm taking it.
That's good advice too. Well, it sounds like you've had a lot of success on the ground, but that wasn't always the case. So I'd like to get into your early hunting career, and I read some of your stories on the Hunting Beast, and I think a lot of times when people see or hear a good hunter, they think, oh, this guy's got it all figured out, and he was just born that way. But it sounds like you had some struggles early on. So tell me about your early hunting career, the first couple of years.
Yeah, that is no lie that it was a struggle. So my dad never really hunted. He hunted turkeys with his buddies from work when it opened up in Wisconsin. I think that was 1989. That was the same year I was born. And once I was getting close to the age of hunting, he had stopped turkey hunting for probably 10 years by then. I kind of grew interest in wanting to do that. And he's like, well, I guess if you want to. So turkey hunting is what really started it. And I loved every minute of it. It was a blast. And then I wanted to move on to deer hunting. And my dad had not deer hunted since he was in high school. So we didn't have any land or anything. And the same group of guys he originally turkey hunted with always went way up in the Northwoods, Wisconsin, up by Park Falls for 9-day gun season every year. And because of when I decided I wanted to start deer hunting, I was 12. My birthday is in October, and there wasn't hunter safety lined up till, I think it was the first week of November. So I couldn't bow hunt anyways. one of my sisters used to bow hunt, and that's what got me into shooting the bow. I think I started shooting bow when I was 8. I would just do a kids league at the local archery shop. I never hunted, but I had experience shooting the bow.
Most kids that age really get into shooting bow. It's a good time.
Yeah, it was fun. Like I said, even though I didn't hunt with it, it was still fun to go shoot it and all that stuff. And so it was that first year I was 12. We went up to Park Falls doing the big Northwoods, Wisconsin tradition. Go up the Friday before. You have this 12-year-old kid that weighs 110 pounds. All right, here's a 100-pound bag of corn. We're going to walk back in here and you're going to dump it. And then you're going to sit over that all weekend. Well, it was that Friday before we did that. We dumped the corn where I was going to sit. It was probably half mile from the truck. It was it was some hardwoods ridges that met in with some cedar swamp stuff. And we put the cat eye thumbtacks and trees so I wouldn't get lost. Dad got me a handheld GPS so I wouldn't get lost. And I was going to be sitting on the ground. So it's opening day of gun season, my first time ever deer hunting. I'm all pumped up, and I get in there early. I'm sitting by myself because I think Dad dropped me off and he went back to the hotel. It's about a half hour, 45 minutes before light, and I hear all this movement really close to me, and you can hear 3 or 4 of them, and I am just tickled. I'm like, oh, I'm going to shoot a deer right away. This is awesome. And they're getting close. They're about 30 yards away, and they stop moving. And it made the scariest noise I've ever heard in my life. It was a wolf, and it was a whole pack of wolves. And here I'm thinking, I'm going to die my first time deer hunting. This is stupid. And that was pretty much how it went. I think we hunted through Tuesday that first year, and we didn't do drives or nothing. That all my buddies that I knew, their families do that. They walk around and stuff during gun, and it's cold up there. I'm underdressed, and I saw one deer in 4 days of sitting from opening light till close, and I didn't really have that much fun because it was kind of miserable. That following fall, I ended up getting up my own bow, and I started going bow hunting with my brother-in-law. And I had fun doing that. It wasn't as cold, and I was seeing more deer. I'm trying to think. I think I shot my first doe when I was 14, so that would have been the year after that.
With a bow or with a gun?
It was with the bow, and I was pretty excited about that. To this day, it was still the second biggest doe I've shot out of probably 30 of them. But I kind of grew away from it because going with him, I mean, I still thank him for taking me along, kind of getting me into bow hunting, but it was more of a go up for the weekend, drink beer, and, well, he would anyways, and hunt an hour in the morning, hunt an hour at night. And to me, I just was all about it. I wanted to be in the woods all day, and it wasn't, so I kind of grew away from it. And I started thinking, well, why drive that far away when there's a couple big public marshes right around where I live? So my dad would eventually start just dropping me off in these marshes around home, and he'd drop me off right after school, and he'd say, well, don't get lost and don't kill yourself. I'll be back at dark. If you're not here after an hour, I guess I'll call the sheriff.
How old were you at this point?
I was probably 15. The first year of that was the same year I shot my doe, but it was a little later into the season. And I had no clue what I was doing. Like I said, I didn't come from a very big hunting background. My only hunting experience was sit over a bait pile, or with my brother-in-law, it was pretty much sitting tree stands and fence lines with crop fields on each side.
I think a lot of guys from the Midwest, that area, Wisconsin, Michigan especially, get their start the same way. I mean, it sounds real familiar. All the early hunting I did was bait piles and, stuff that my dad or stepdad or whatever did. So Yeah, it's pretty common. But after you get rolling here and not having much success, but you're bow hunting the marshes around home, what kept you after it? It sounds like you just were into hunting. And when did you, after the doe, how long until you shot your first buck?
Yeah, I was big into it. I just love being out here and just this wild, vast expanse of nothing but crappy conditions where you walk the wrong way in one direction, you're dropping in a hole of water that goes over your head. And I don't know what it was, but I liked it. But I did it for like a year, 2 years, got my license, driver's license, and I would spend like every day out here, and I could just not get on the deer. I was basically hunting like how you see it on TV, and I'm hunting field edges and in the hardwoods, which I know now that you're not going to kill deer in these public places like that. But I finally got sick of it, and I got in duck hunting. It was midway through the year I was 16, and then I would still bow hunt on occasion and gun hunt the 9 day, because in Wisconsin you have to do that. It's like a law.
Right?
You have to gun
It's
hunt.
religion, right?
But I lost excitement in it because my success was so bad. And I think I was 20 years old. I was either 19 or 20. I'm terrible with dates, but it was 3-4 years where I mainly was just duck hunting. And I went out this one morning to duck hunt. It was cold. There was ice in the marsh. I was breaking ice. I almost hit a pretty big buck driving to where I was going to launch my skiff. And I spent about an hour and a half busting ice getting back to the pothole I wanted to sit in, which was happened to be right next to this little red brush island out in the middle of this 6,400 acre marsh.
I know where this story is going.
Yeah, and I'm sitting there, and I think I'm hearing stuff. I don't know. Maybe I am just mentally hearing stuff. And you couldn't, I don't know if the law changed or not, but it had to be, I think you could not have duck decoys in the water until an hour before shooting light. So I throw my decoys out and I get back in my skiff and I pour some coffee in this on this little island that was, you could hear it was wet in some spots. There's crap running around. I'm like, what in the heck is going on? And all of a sudden I heard a grunt and another grunt and a snort wheeze, and I heard antlers crashing. This is 30 yards from where I'm sitting. Like, there's freaking deer out here? How in the heck? Because it's like a mile from dry land, and I could not believe it. And it's about a half hour before light yet. And that was the moment where I'm like, okay, I've been hunting wrong the whole time, and that's why I hated it and stopped doing it, and that's why I'm not seeing them. And it kind of put it into perspective where, okay, now it makes sense. These deer are way out here because there's a lot of people that are hunting the same way I am on the field edges and in the woods. And I mean, you drive around at night shining and the deer are out there 2 hours after legal light, but that's not where they're living. And then that winter, I just went to town. I walked, I don't know how many miles I put on. I'm hitting all these spots way out, and that's where all the sign was. And then I just I made a mental, I guess, talk to myself like, all right, we got it now. We got it figured out. We're going to start killing some freaking deer. And then that's pretty much what happened. That following gun season, I killed my first big buck. That's a long story, but I'll end up just saying I ended up shooting him at 3 yards in standing corn because I tracked him into it, and I walked around the standing corn and it had just snowed, and I could see he did not come out of it. So I just walked in, and I could start seeing where stalks were knocked over, where he had obviously had to have run through here. And I look up, and he's standing right there,
Wow.
facing away. He he turns his head at me with like the old crap look, and I didn't even pull my shotgun up. I shot from the hip and hit him right in the neck and
Wow.
dropped him. I couldn't believe it, and I mean that was only the second or third deer I had shot, so right away I want to grab this big rack, and he starts flipping out and rolling around. I put the barrel right on his chest and put one through the heart right there. And now he's my brother-in-law. He calls me, goes, "Well, that second shot sounded pretty close." I said, "Yeah, so was the first one. I think he's dead now."
How old were you then? If my math's right, probably 20, 21 then?
Yeah, I think I was 20. That fall, now that I think I have this all figured out, I got onto some bucks, and I've pretty much shot a doe or two every year since then with the bow. But I was passing up a lot of bucks with my bow that I don't know why I was. I guess I just thought that I had to shoot something big right away or people are going to make fun of me or all that crap. But I was passing up a lot of bucks with the bow that year too. And then the next year, I was 21 when I shot my first bull buck, and it was a little 5-pointer. He comes in, it's the week before gun season. I thought, you know what? I've never shot a buck with my bow. I'm shooting this thing. And I shot him, and I was happy as hell. And since then, I think I shot 12 or 13 bucks now in Wisconsin.
You've been on a pretty steady roll then once you figured it out.
Yeah, and every year I'm learning more stuff. It never stops.
So that was probably the first, the shotgun buck in the cornfield and your first bow buck. That's probably early 2000s then, 2000, 2002, somewhere in there.
No, I think it was like 2009 because I'm 30 now. So I would say this is going into my 11th season of actually being pretty hardcore about deer hunting.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I was off a decade there on my math. So so it sounds like you were rolling pretty good. When did you join the hunting beast?
So the local archery shop is actually, and a lot of guys know him because he's the public land challenge master. Joe Rentmeester worked there, and he's the same age as me. And I know he knew that I mainly hunted these public marshes around where I live. And he mentioned something about it, about the hunting beast and stuff. And at one time I had Googled or something, public marsh hunting, and the original Blood Brothers DVD popped up. And I was asking him about it. And one way or another, I saw the picture where Joe, or the video, I should say, where Joe shoots the apple tree buck. And he's like, "Yeah, you should join the hunting beast and stuff like that." I'm like, I don't know. I'm really not in the forums and stuff like that. And I didn't, but I had talked to Joe enough, and he's like, "Yeah, this Dan guy, he's the real deal." And well, whatever, doesn't mean anything to me, you know. But after a while, I found, yeah, I'll look it up, and I did, and it was funny because the reason Joel was kind of pushing me towards it, he's like, "Dude, you got to get on here because it's like exactly like how you hunt. Everything from the bedding and getting right in there right away. If you blow a spot, who cares? Because you should have 20 more lined up," which by that time I did, because I just started scouting like a madman. And okay, I'll go for this one tonight. If I screw it up, it's on to the next one, and it doesn't really bother me too much.
It sounds like you kind of came to a lot of the same conclusions that Dan did just by trial and error and hunting in the marshes.
I did.
Once you joined the hunting beast, it sounds like you're hunting in a pretty similar style. Did you pick up anything, or did your style really change after you started getting on the forum and reading some of what the other guys were doing?
Well, I would say, so when I first got on the forum, and I used to not comment much. I had a different username, and then I kind of stopped going on there for a while, and I couldn't remember what my username and I got a new email, so I ended up having to make a new account a couple years ago. But just reading through everything, it was kind of like a light bulb deal where, hey, they're using milkweed to check wind too. And like I noticed it just from walking out the spots, mainly duck hunting, where you'd brush up against it and it would fly perfect, whichever way the wind was going. You could see it dancing around in the air and it then goes in one straight direction. And it was a bunch of stuff like that. Okay, I'm not nuts for doing the stuff I'm doing, or I'm not. I guess the biggest thing I noticed was it's it's not that I'm getting lucky. It actually, and it makes sense why this style is working for me. So it was cool to see that, and I do pick up plenty of stuff all the time on there now. Even hey, maybe you ever thought about this or set up there? Maybe the biggest thing I learned was to observation sets, which I really didn't do that much at all. Now I do it quite a bit. Even this time of year, I'll walk in 500 yards, hang my lone wolf or tree stand that I've never shot a buck out of, and sit there all night and glass deer.
Yeah, it's definitely easier to glass from an elevated position, that's for sure. So, are you able to see a lot of these cattail areas that you're hunting, or the fringe bedding areas? Are you able to see the deer coming out of them from these observation sits?
Um, yes and no, but like what I pick up more and more is you hear one coming from a certain area, and I'm mainly doing these observation sits on stuff I've walked or places I'm pretty confident in of what's going to happen. And you don't always see them, but you can tell just the way they walk. One step, sit for 5 minutes, couple more steps, wait another couple minutes, and the same thing like during actual hunting season, where you just got that feeling, even though you don't see it. This has got to be a good buck because he is taking his sweet time making these last 50 yards. But I will too climb up a tree this time of year, observations at 30-40 feet, even though I don't really hunt that way, just so I can see. Because a lot of guys too always ask, well, why don't you hunt out of a tree? You're afraid of heights? Oh, no, not really. I'm a construction worker. I've got plenty of experience working heights, so it's not that.
Well, it sounds like you're knocking down plenty of big ones without climbing a tree, so I don't know if I'd necessarily be in a hurry to change either. So one of the other things I read on the hunting beast, I was looking through some of the old threads, getting ready for this podcast, was you talked about face painting, and I think especially on the ground, whether it's face paint or covering your face with a mask or a neck gaiter or head net, whatever it is, that's important. So talk to me about or what you do for your face painting and kind of your feelings on covering your face in general.
All right. Well, I'm going to say it right away. I do not put face paint on to look cool. I already know I'm not that cool, but yeah, I was kind of when I first was getting back into it and I was figuring it out, but I was getting busted constantly. And I'm like, it's got to be my face. It's glowing white. They got to be seeing that. So pretty much ever since that, I'm putting face paint on every night. I know a lot of guys from the hunting public have success on the ground and stuff without it, but to me, I just feel confident doing it, so I do it. I don't do the black bone collector style. I usually do like green, gray, brown, kind of do like a Navy SEAL stripe pattern to actually, because I want to actually break up my face and not look like a raccoon sitting there
Right.
looking at them. But and the reason I don't wear face masks, sometimes early season I do just to keep the mosquitoes out of my mouth and stuff. But I hate wearing them. That's all there is to it. But face paint, I don't know. I do my ears and everything.
100% coverage then? Are you covering like every part of your face, or when you said stripes, is that like different colors, or are you leaving any skin, or just all paint?
Yeah, I usually do not leave any skin. Some years I have a beard, some years I have a mustache, some years I got nothing. But I'm usually covering it at my neck too, whatever's gonna stick out. I just noticed even like the adult does, they'll pick out anything. But if they come in and you don't make eye contact with them, actually, if a deer's coming in and I see them and I know I'm not going to shoot them, but they're going to walk right past, if I'm not right in the cattails and I'm on the edge where I'm a little more, I guess, visible, I'll close my eyes till I hear that they're well past me. Because I know I'm going to end up looking at them because I just want to look at them because I like looking at deer. And it's like every time if you make eye contact, the game's over instantly.
I agree 100%. Yep, I purposely try not to look at deer, or I squint or look away or anything to not show most of my eyes, because I definitely think they pick up on that.
Last year here in Wisconsin, actually it was 2 years ago, opening weekend it was going to be hot. It was going to be 90 degrees, and the mosquito hatch that year was just awful. And everyone, all my buddies and people I know that are hunters are, oh, you can't go bow hunting opening weekend. It's too hot. And the mosquitoes are awful. I'm like, all right, I'm going to go hunting opening day in nothing but my boxers, and I'm going to totally face paint my whole body. You're freaking nuts. I did it, and I have video. I bet you 5 different deer walked right past me. I didn't shoot one, but I'm taking selfies with them. Like, I don't know what the problem is. There's plenty of deer moving. It's not that hot. Oh, the mosquitoes are not that bad, I guess, but they were pretty bad.
Yeah, one of the things you do it just to do it, right?
Yep, pretty much.
Well, let's get into the actual hunting now. Are you hunting mostly mornings, evenings? Does it depend on the time of the season? Are you doing any all-day sits during the rut? And if you are, talk about any experiences you've had with midday movement.
So, anyone that knows me knows that I am not a morning person at all.
Amen.
I hate waking up. I don't like waking up for work. All summer, I'm a big walleye tournament guy. I love fishing. I don't even like waking up in the mornings for that. So honestly, I'm really hunting nights mainly because of that reason, because I'm too stubborn to want to wake up in the morning. But I do hunt mornings, and I've shot a couple bucks in the morning too. But it's mainly nights. Even with hunting mostly nights, I always talk to people that are making excuses. Oh, I don't have time, and so I work construction, and I'm not. Who knows where I'm going to be next month? A lot of times, and I've worked up to two hours from home. But you better believe I am getting out that night, no matter what. Even if I only have 45 minutes to park the truck before dark, and it might not be just a hunt. It might be to glass, but I'm still taking my bow with me because I've gotten it done multiple times with very little time. As far as all day sits, I'm kind of too antsy to sit in one spot all day, even though I know there's a couple locations where I should, but I can. If it gets to 8, 9 o'clock in the morning, I'm not seeing anything. I'll stay out all day, but I'm getting down, walking around, trying to find what clue I missed or go find a new spot. During the rut, I've went out. I have skipped the morning and then go hunt from like 9:30 till about 2 o'clock. And I've had action that way. I should have shot a pretty big one year, but I had to pee so bad. I finally turned around to pee, and here there was like 140 incher stand 15 yards away the whole time. I never knew it because it was windy and it was snowing. Yeah, and I never heard him come in. As soon as I started doing my business, I heard a blow, and I turned around and thought, you got to be kidding me.
Oh, that's funny. Mostly evenings, huh?
It's mostly nights. Yep.
So let's talk about since you are hunting. It sounds like almost totally, or are you hunting totally public land?
Yep, 100%. Probably till the day I die, just because I like the challenge of it.
Yeah, I hear you there. Let's talk about accessing areas or areas that you've shot deer. Are you looking at like the whole public? Are you excluding areas? Are you going extra deep? What type of terrain features are you looking for? And this is kind of a generic question, but just to gauge what you think the impact on pressure is. Would you rather hunt like a mediocre spot 3 miles in, or would you rather hunt something that looks great that's a half a mile from the parking lot? I guess what I'm asking is, does pressure trump everything else in your experience?
Yeah, in my area, pressure dictates where the deer are going to be. And now, with that being said, there's a public marsh right 10 minutes from my house, and I hunt it a lot. That's probably my favorite spot to hunt, just because I know it intimately, because I spent so much time out here. And like, people are always coming up to the parking lot. Oh, you're that Marshbuster guy. I have no clue who you are. I don't even know how you know I am. But with that being said, I usually hunt 7 to 8 different counties in Wisconsin a year. And I'm always trying to find out where other guys are hunting. That, to me, that's a pretty big element to figuring out the deer's patterns, because after that first weekend, now you've had the squirrel hunters coming in, walking around, because I think that opens usually September 1st, I believe. I could be wrong, but you got those guys walking around, and them deer are kicked out of their summer bedding pretty quick. I prefer hard to access or way totally overlooked spots. And I'll have people, oh, I saw your truck. I know where you hunt. Or you always hunt that side of the marsh and this and that. And like, a lot of times I'll park in a totally different parking lot and either bike down the public road or walk and go to a totally different area.
You got to be a little trickier when you get a reputation as a big buck killer, I think.
Yeah, it's tough. I've had about 6 or 7 different vehicles in the past 8 years now too, and I try staying hidden. Even I personally don't think I'm that great of a deer hunter. I don't know why people are trying to follow me. I'm stubborn and don't give up. I think that's my main reason why I'm successful. But I would rather hunt a spot that looks really good and isn't necessarily far away than go 3 miles out and there's some sign. And it depends on the area too, because I've noticed a lot of big bucks don't leave that much sign, especially rubs. But
talk about that, because I've told people that, and I think it's not always the case, but it seems like the 2 and 3-year-old bucks leave a lot more sign. So, what are you doing to find these deer? Is it like just bedding areas that should hold a big deer because they're deep, or tracks, or are you using cameras, combination? Like, what are you doing each year to kind of build up your inventory, or your potential, I guess, for lack of a better term, your hit list?
well, it pretty much never ends as far as scouting for me. It's pretty much every 365 year-round thing. But once you start figuring it out, you just got a feeling. There's no way anything's gonna walk up to this thing without it getting away and seeing you or smelling you first. And I scout all winter, summer, during season, the day after season, or either the day after bow season if I didn't fill my tag, or the day after gun season when most people are done for the year. I go pretty hardcore and just walk everything that's potential bedding on edges or just random high spots out surrounded by water is a big one. I do a lot of map scouting. I used to be really, really big into trail cameras. When I first got back into hunting, deer hunting, when I kind of stopped duck hunting, I think I went and bought 10 Moultrie cameras, and I was running them everywhere, and I would get pictures of big bucks a lot. And I just couldn't kill them. And I think the reason for that was I was so antsy. I'd check them every 3 weeks, and I was burning up spots pretty bad. So now I don't use them that much. I'll put them way far away where I see them shining at night or something like that, way out towards the crop fields, way away from the bedding, just to get an inventory. Because now, like scouting in spring and early summer and find the bedding areas, I just want to know who is using that area. And then I can kind of pick and choose from there. I know some guys are big in the actual hit list and targeting certain bucks. For the most part, I'm not, unless it's something that really catches my attention. I really want to kill them. But for the most part, I just hunt the best spots I find.
Right, and there's usually a buck worth shooting in those spots if you're not necessarily after one particular buck then.
Right. Yep. And I hunt every single day of the year until I fill my buck tag, no matter what.
Like literally every day? Are you hunting every day of the week?
Every single day.
Even if like you said, even if it's only for 45 minutes, huh?
Yep. And if I'm not necessarily hunting, I'm going scouting, but I have my bow with me. And I shoot a lot of does that way. I shot one buck doing that. But yeah, I go every day. So I have a lot of spots because I generally, unless I saw something good to bring me back, I'm not coming back to that spot until next year. Or if I've tried it a couple of years in a row and it hasn't produced, that spot gets crossed off and look for something new in spring. So I usually try to have about 50 different spots picked out here, which is hard for a lot of my buddies that hunt private to put their hands around. They can't. Oh, there's not that many good spots, but
Well, I'm sure you're covering tons of ground to find that many though, right?
yeah. And my fishing partner and I were just talking about the other day because they lease some pretty nice land in the central part of the state, and they pay like $3,000-4,000 to hunt it. They shoot nice deer, no doubt, but I always give them crap. I'm like, oh, all that money is spent on these deer to shoot them. I mean, you can just pretty much call them by name and have them come up because they're so tame. And he said something last weekend that I'd never really thought about, even though I do it all the time. He's like, you probably spend more than I do in a year in gas. I'm like, you know what? I guarantee I spend more than that in gas because it's like every day I'm not doing something. I'm driving somewhere. I don't care if it's 3 hours away just to check a spot for an hour. I'll go check it just to either confirm what I thought it looked like on a map or cross it off and say, yeah, it looked a lot better than what it is. But
I feel you there, man. I've spent a small fortune in gas since I moved to Montana. It's a big state and everything's new, so I've been putting on tons of miles, and I'm sure I've spent plenty of money there.
for sure, especially out west, you only have a couple of roads to get places. I'm sure you got to drive a lot further than you really need to get to a spot just because of the way the roads work.
Yeah, that's true. Well, I want to get back to, so we talked about, kind of how you're finding these spots. And you've killed, what, 12, 14 bucks it sounds like now, somewhere a good number and quite a few big ones. Have you killed most of these deer early season, rut, or late season? And if you have some early season and late season kills especially, I'd be interested in hearing about those because I consider myself, pretty average deer hunter, and I've killed most of my deer late October and November. And a lot of that's because Michigan, where I lived for a long time, the opener's not until October 1st. But now, this year, I have a North Dakota tag that opens September 4th, and I have Montana deer tag, and that opens September 5th. So I know you guys in Wisconsin get started earlier. If you got any early season tips, I'd be interested in hearing those too.
Yeah, early season is my favorite time to hunt because they're still off guard and they're not used to the pressure yet, and it ties a lot back into like the late night shining or the right before dark glassing. they're still on their summer patterns and coming out to ag fields a lot of the time, especially that first week. Because I personally feel like my best chance at a real big one is opening day, and I have a lot of blown opportunities over the past 10 years on like opening weekend, and it's either I miss them or I set up wrong or just stupid stuff. But early season, they're still kind of in their summer patterns. Oh, for sure I've noticed it's like the day they shed their velvet, though. They know, especially if it's an older buck that's been through the ringer a couple times, they know that something's about to happen and there's going to be pressure, and then they kind of change a little bit and they might bet differently. But I still think that first week they still want to get to their primary food source they've been feeding the last 2 months at a decent time. I haven't shot a lot of bucks early season, but like I said, I've had a lot of opportunities. And another excuse I always hear is, the full moon crap, which I do not believe at all. I'm a big muskie fisherman, and anyone that muskie fishes knows the moon is everything. But as far as deer, I don't think it does at all. I hear a lot of guys say, it's a full moon, that's why I didn't see anything tonight. And my biggest early season buck was a full moon, an hour before dark, about 80 yards from the food source he was using all summer. I actually did have trail camera pictures of him, and I was scouting him, glassing him quite a bit.
So on your early season setups, sounds like bed to food pattern, which would be expected. And you said you've had a lot of opportunities, and to me that's just as good as getting an arrow in one, or almost, for the sake of this discussion. Are you setting up, or have you seen them bedding on average closer to the food, or does the bedding that you see them in early season, is that different bedding than you'd see them in, say, middle or end of October? What's been your experience there?
I would say the majority of the main properties I hunt, they're usually by that time, like I said about when they shed their velvet, they're usually at their spots they're going to be that are in deeper by then. Not always, but a majority of them. And I know other guys that say and have experience, and I'm not doubting them at all, and they're saying that the bucks are in totally different bedding areas and up closer during the early season. And maybe it's just because of the places I hunt aren't necessarily that far away from big towns, so there's pressure right away. But most of them are still back in a ways, or they're sitting right next to the road and watching people.
So that stuff that you're spring scouting or winter scouting, when you're finding that real premium looking bedding that's a ways in, that's the stuff you're hunting right away, even early season then?
Yeah, usually right away, unless it's like night or two before opener and I'm glassing and notice that these bucks are already in the fields at an hour before dark. Then I'll set up close.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Hard to beat that kind of intel.
Right. But if I'm not seeing anything coming out early, I'm going in right away.
No, that makes a lot of sense. I got a couple of buddies myself that have hunted southern Michigan public, and that's been the same thing we've seen, where there's a lot of guys in the week before the season, either small game hunting. Michigan's youth season opens before the bow opener, or you got guys in their hanging stands that those better bucks are already in those really secluded security bedding spots on the opener. So let's talk about any gear. Sounds like you got a pretty simple, straightforward setup, but is there any pieces of gear that are critical for your success? And if there are, describe them.
Yeah, I am pretty low key on gear. I know that the new trend is everyone's all about gear, and you got to do this mod to this piece, and guys are more worried about their gear than actually scouting or finding deer. But I'm a minimalist when it comes to my hunting gear. I'm usually wearing my work pants, and I'll throw like I got my killing sweatshirt. That sweatshirt's, oh boy, probably 15 years old. It's a little tight now, but it's faded. It's an old Max 4 cattail pattern, and whatever hat I pick out that night or I'm wearing, that's pretty much it. My bow and those little, you buy them at a farm and supply or gardening place, those little foam kneeling pads that your mom uses to plant her petunias in, kneel down on. That's my key piece of equipment for actual ground hunting. Now a lot of times I can't use it because it's wet anyways, but
So are you're kneeling then most of the time when you're on the ground on one of those pads?
yep, most of the time. If I'm in the cattails and it's wet, if I'm wearing hip boots or waders, I'll kneel. Um, I've brought out a piece of plywood in the past a couple times just to give me a foundation to stand on. So every time I move, I'm not sinking down a little further. But I mean, I don't bring much. I hate carrying crap with me. That was kind of a reason I got out of hunting tree stands because I hated the extra weight and you're catching on crap and making noise. And being on the ground too, I feel way more confident because if I see something, I'm not tied down to a tree. I can move now if I gotta. And not having a lot of gear helps with that because I can be quiet. I have a little fanny pack that I'll keep not much in. Water usually. Most of the time a knife, but it always seems like when I forget the knife in the truck is when I kill one. So
That's right. Leave it in there.
rangefinder. I always have a rangefinder and binoculars on me. Even if I am going to be in cattails and I can't see more than 5 feet, I always have them on me because I love looking at stuff as I'm walking out.
Yeah, the last couple of years especially I've really started and I mean out west it's more obvious, but even before I moved out west, having the binoculars with me all the time. I mean, always have them on hunting. I always keep them in the console of the truck when I'm driving around. You never know when you're going to see something good. So that's I'm on board there for sure. The glass. Well, we're on the gear. I know you said the one deer you shot in the neck, you used a Grim Reaper broadhead. Are you still using those?
So I never used to be a mechanical guy at all. And how I ended up shooting them, I don't remember what year it was, but it's probably been 7 years now. We were shooting archery league, and it was the last shoot of the year for our league, and it was a week before the season. And I had always shot thunderheads, just plain old 100 grain new archery products brand thunderheads. But we were shooting league, and my buddy goes, "What the hell is that sound?" Every time I was almost locked into full draw, I couldn't hear it. I was focused on hitting the 12 ring. He goes, "Draw back again." And I did, and he could see my limbs were delaminating. I'm like, oh crap, that could have been bad.
Oh yeah.
So I took it into the archery shop, and I'm like, I need this thing fixed now because season's in like 5 days, and hell or high water, I am going bow hunting. At the time, I wasn't using a recurve yet. So we swapped the limbs, and I had very minimal time between work and stuff to get it really dialed in, which is a poor excuse for shooting mechanicals, but I sighted it in and got my field tips shooting good, and I pretty much said to myself, I'm just going to get the biggest, baddest expandable I can, and that's what I'm going to use. And my first deer with those was a doe, and like I said, I like shooting 80 yards. I'll shoot 100 yards too, but I always shot that far because I always wanted to go out west, Kansas or Nebraska, and bow hunt too. And I know the possibility of a 50, 60-yard shot is very likely out there. So I had this doe at 58 yards, and she was calm as could be. It was on the edge of an alfalfa field. It was opening week, so deer were still unpressured. And I ranged her about 4 times. came full draw. I held back for probably half a minute, making sure the wind was right. I wasn't going to shoot if something wasn't right. And I shot, and I actually got a complete pass through with that. So I was pretty impressed by it. She went 20 yards and dumped over. I thought, holy crap, well, if I'm shooting bucks at 10 yards with these things, that'd be pretty slick. So then I ended up just sticking with them until last fall. And last fall was the best fall I've ever had in my life. First time ever I went out to Colorado elk hunting, and I know I'm not using expandables on elk. So I went back to Thunderheads, and now I'm back using them again.
Okay.
I definitely like the advantage of the bigger blades with or the bigger cutting diameter, I guess, with mechanicals, but I mean, I work with enough stuff in the construction that moving objects are going to fail at some point, and it's always in the back of my head. And now that I got my bow shooting thunderheads with a 3-inch group at 50 yards again, I'm just going to stick with them.
What about your arrows and the high FOC craze? Are you shooting 100 grain, 125? Any inserts, heavier arrows, all that stuff?
So I used to have pretty light arrows. They were Easton flatlines. I think they were flatlines. They were a pretty light arrow, and I shot them. Never had a problem with them, but I'm shooting so close, so I wasn't worried about kinetic energy or anything like that. But last summer, as I'm getting ready for elk hunting, I knew I needed heavy arrows and high front center. So I got totally new arrow setup, and I went with full metal jackets with 100 grain brass inserts, but I dialed everything in with 100 grain thunderheads again, just because if I'm setting my bow up to elk hunt with this and spend all the money on these arrows, it's going to be my bow hunting setup too. I'm not going to have multiple setups. But the arrows themselves total now are 568 grains. I can't remember off the top of my head what the front of center is, but it's pretty, it's up there.
That's a pretty heavy arrow. What are you shooting for draw weight and draw length?
Draw weight, it's a 70-pound bow, but we twisted the strings and got 74 and a half out of it. My draw length's 29 and a half, so it's got some power.
For sure. All right, well, that's probably, it sounds like that's the extent of the gear, and that's fine. I think Ryan had, similar answers. Less is more on the gear and spend more time in the woods, and I definitely agree with that. Just, I know that especially broadheads and arrows right now, that's always a hot topic, and people are curious what people are doing, so I thought we'd go over that. Let's move back into, and I think I heard you mention this, and maybe I already know what your answer is, but I'm going to ask the question anyways. What do you think is the single biggest factor contributing to your success? And if you could only do one thing to prepare for the season, what would it be?
I think the single biggest part of me being successful is my sheer stubbornness. I hate failing, and I like everything to work perfectly, which it never does, but I just try everything I can to make the most out of my time. If I'm scouting with a purpose. I'm not just going to go walk around aimlessly just because a spot looks good or it's got a reputation of having big bucks. I'm going to look at it first on a map and go check these spots that there should be deer. I'm stubborn, and I hate not reaching my goal, so I don't stop. Like this time of year right now, I've been getting up early. As much as I told you I hate mornings, I've been going shining, which is legal here in Wisconsin, at 3 a.m. before work or before a fishing tournament, and seeing if I can find where these bucks are right now. Because usually this time of year, by that time of morning, they're getting pretty close to where they're going to bed because it's cracking daylight before 5.
Right.
But I do anything I can to try helping me be better and more successful that year. And it's just because I'm stubborn. That's all there is to it.
Two follow-up questions there. You mentioned scouting, and we're going to get to that in 1 second. But Michigan, you can shine until 11 p.m. You can't shine in November at all, but you know during the summer and the bow season, you can shine until 11. Wish you could shine all night there, but you can't. How often are you going shining right now? You said getting up before work. You going once a week, once a month, 5 times a week?
It's usually about this time of year, late July, where most of our walleye tournaments are done, and it's like the flip of a switch where, okay, it's deer every day now. So it's, boy, if I'm not shining every night because I'm tired, I'm at least going out glassing somewhere. Right now, I'm sitting in a parking lot. When we're done here, I'm going to end up just glassing and then probably drive around and shine my way home. The other night, because I usually get up at like 4:30 for work. And the other night, I went out with the purpose to just glass one field, and I left the house at 7:30, and I just kept driving north and driving north. The next thing I know, I'm shining, and it's midnight, and I got about an hour and a half drive. I'm like, well, it is what it is.
Yeah, man, it's hard once you get going. It's I definitely feel you there. I'm addicted to glassing and shining.
It's crazy. Yeah, about this time of year is when I get like almost blackout crazy about it, where I cannot think about anything else.
Yeah, that's so when we're gonna get into scouting here now, but I think it's easy to look at someone that's had your kind of success and think, oh, like I said, that guy's lucky or it just happens. But you're doing this stuff 24/7, 365, or pretty close to it, putting in like your buddy said, tons of miles, lots of gas. This stuff just doesn't happen by accident. When you're scouting, before you ever get boots on the ground, and we didn't really cover this, I've heard you mention scouting, map scouting or e-scouting, whatever you want to call it, quite a few times. What features, and you're hunting mostly marshes, it sounds like, what sticks out to you? I mean, you've got 10 years of doing this now, it sounds like, pretty consistently. When you look at a map and compare it to areas you've been in that have good bucks, what sticks out to you? What kind of terrain features or parts of the marsh are you really keying in on in your cyber scouting?
Yeah, think about all this scouting that's all year, and then it really ramps up in spring and now in fall, and that's all to shoot. In Wisconsin, you can shoot one buck with your bow and one with your gun. So it's all that work just for maybe one or two bucks in the season. Like you said, a lot of guys, oh, you gotta be the luckiest guy I know. I do a lot of work just for these, and it's not like I'm successful my first night out. Sometimes it's my 40th hunt of the year before I even see a shooter. Yeah, when I'm looking at maps, I am looking for spots that other people aren't going to go. Whether it's an island or you're going to need a kayak to get in there, maybe it's just a couple random trees out in the middle somewhere. I mean, it's mainly spots where other guys aren't going to go. A lot of guys will say, "Yeah, I'm going to go back there," and they don't. I know a lot of guys are talk, but if you want to get on them in these public marshes, that is what you have to do. You got to go to spots where it's not the funnest to get to, but the reward is worth it a lot of times. And when I'm talking to people, I'm not trying to be arrogant or anything like that. I probably come off like that just because I'm a construction worker and I don't have a very good emotional voice. But there's no way around it. You can't just go out and try to get lucky. You get lucky once or twice, but you got to put the work in. And when I'm looking at maps, I'm looking where are guys not going to want to go.
It sounds like factor number one is difficult access or low pressure. Then you're getting away from the hardwoods and the trails and the stuff that's probably pretty common knowledge on the hunting beast is difficult. But have you noticed any trends like these bedding areas that you're finding? Like you said, the one was just kind of in the middle of cattails. Have you seen any common themes, whether it's points or bowls, islands? Like where have you seen the most bucks, good bucks? What kind of terrain feature?
So for me in East Central Wisconsin, I know like on the beast that talk about the lone trees out in the cattails and stuff usually have high ground. And I don't know what's different here, but a lot of times them are almost always underwater. But the best spots I have found have not had trees. They're just high spots. You cannot see them on a map, really. You just got to walk out there and find them. There might be some red brush or it changes from cattails to grassy area. You can actually see them on a map if you look in, and all of a sudden the trails all converge into one spot, but that to your eye it looks like there's no terrain feature.
Okay.
But that's usually one of them high spots, and they're almost always surrounded by water, or it's wet. It might not even be that deep of water, but they're still not going to lay in that all day.
So, are you following deer trails into these areas, or are you finding those converging points on aerials and then purposely going to check those out, or maybe a combination of those, or something else?
Yeah, it's a combination. I'll follow the trails in because they got to be coming from somewhere for a reason. Uh, I'll I'll follow the sign into a spot. Yeah, I always do that. I look at the map first at home, and then on my way there. Or once I get there, and okay, this is the section I'm going to check today. And as I start getting close, I look at the sign, and sometimes the signs point me in a different direction, but I keep following that. And along the sign, I think a lot of guys get hung up on that they have to see big rubs, and that's going to throw them off, I think, because in these higher pressure areas, there's not that many deer, and the bigger bucks do not lay down that much sign. And the sign they're laying down is well away from where their core area is or where you're going to see them during daylight.
Right, rubbing in the hardwoods and field edges and stuff. The middle of the night.
Yes. Or even spots. I mean, if I come up to a spot and there's 5 or 6 waist high good big rubs, but they're 3-4 years old, I'm still taking that into account and checking it, because to me that's saying there's something in this area that has what it needs for a big buck to hang out here. A lot of times that's rut sign from what I've noticed. So I will keep that in mind, and if they're old rubs or from last season, I'll try finding the doe bedding first, because they're probably in there all year, and then from there I can look down the major downwind side of it, and then I usually do find where the buck beds are. And there's not a lot of sign in them. Like I said, there might be a little sapling that's just busted off, and that's it. But if that was a 2.5 or 3.5-year-old buck, every little sapling in that area would be destroyed.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question. So, how do you determine if that is a big buck bedding area? It sounds like maybe less sign is better, but I know you mentioned on the buck you killed with the next shot that was the beds were real large. So, you're looking at bed size, or what other factors are you seeing? Big tracks? And it sounds like that buck didn't necessarily have big tracks. So, what's giving you the confidence that that's a better buck in there? What kind of sign specifically?
Back to my last answer. I screwed it up. I meant to say east winds, because usually we got west winds, northwest. But anyways, bed size for sure. And it's hard to describe without seeing it in person right now, but you just get a feel for it when it's a good buck using it. Like I said, you look at it and you're like, how in the heck there's no way that this thing would get killed in here, because he's seeing you or smelling you or hearing you way before you're getting to him. And it's not just a single one bed that's got a rub in it. Sometimes there's features like on a point or something where there is only one spot, but that buck probably isn't using that every day. He's only going to use it when the wind's blowing in his favor. But definitely I look at bed size, tracks, and like I said, I don't always, if it's a smaller track, I don't necessarily say to myself that that's a little buck. If I'm getting in there when I'm scouting and it's starting to get nasty, but there's a little tangle or something there where he can be watching and smelling the wind, and it's like bomb proof. If you were trying to hide from someone and you could smell like a deer and hear like them, I get pretty excited, especially if way before that process up on the mainland I've seen good rubs or historic sign of rubs, and then I get back in there and see a bed like that, maybe surrounded by water. It's not a very big area, but they can maneuver around anything, good escape routes. I get pretty fired up when I see that. Even, I mean, it's March, April, and I see that, and I wish bow hunting open tomorrow.
Yeah, man, it's a shame it's not a year-round sport. So you're talking about these areas, and I know I've heard Dan mention it too. Like, they make you scratch your head. They're bomb-proof. How are you getting into these areas and fooling these deer? Are you taking like a real long time? Are you going in extra early? What do you think what are you specifically doing that maybe other guys aren't doing that allows you to get in and get that close?
Sometimes it's kayak access. I'm almost always wearing hip boots. I don't know why. I might as well wear Crocs because I usually end up soaked anyways, but I wear them. Guys are worried about how they're going to get in. They don't want to fall up to their chest in water. And I think the biggest hang up for a lot of people that I don't care about is, how are you getting out? How are you getting a deer out? How am I going to find my way out in the dark? I honestly, even if it's a place I have never been to and I've only cyber scouted it, and it's a Wednesday in October and I'm sick of hunting the stuff I have because I'm not seeing what I want, so I'm just going to go for it. I honestly couldn't care less about the getting out part. That we'll worry about that when it happens.
Are you using a GPS or a compass or Onyx? I mean, it sounds like you're not too worried about getting totally lost.
I usually have a compass on me. I have my phone on me, but a lot of spots it's pretty crappy reception. But I usually do. I'll pull my phone up and look at it once I'm right about to dive into the cattails or whatever, swamp or whatever it's going to be, just so I can get a bearing of what I got to aim for, and then I'll look at my compass and go for it. There's a lot of times I come out on a different trail, but I still make it out.
Yeah, and that's I think that just comes with time in the woods too. And if guys are worried about that, the more time you spend in the woods, even just scouting, hunting, the more times you successfully get out of areas like that, you just like hunting, you get more confidence that you can do it and you worry about it less and less.
For sure. There's been times where, say it closed at 7:00, and there's times where it might have only been a mile from the truck, but I got back to the truck at midnight. And
get a little turned around
it's
there.
Humbling.
Huh?
It's humbling, but that's all part of the ride. That's what makes it fun.
Yeah, I've been lost probably 2 or 3 times pretty good. And one time I had a GPS, but I grabbed the wrong coat, and I knew how to get into the spot because I'd been into it scouting several times. But it was pretty forested and some swamp in there. And I made a wrong turn somewhere, and I got lost for quite a while out there, and has a big area with not a lot of roads. So yeah, that'll make you be a little more prepared. But I got out. I'm still here, still alive.
Yep. Now you got a story to tell.
Yeah, exactly. One of the things that I've been doing the last few years, more and more, and I think it's more and more valuable, is in-season scouting. So tell me about if you're in-season scouting, and if you are you looking for different things in season versus spring scouting? And what kind of sign gets you real excited if you're doing in-season scouting?
I think if you're not doing in-season scouting, you are putting a big hurt on yourself, because things change daily and you always got to be looking for stuff. I mean, the main thing I'm looking at in season is probably tracks on field edges, or maybe rubs and scrapes opening up. But like I said, I am scouting my whole way in every single hunt, every night. And if I'm seeing sign, say I wanted to hunt spot A, but I'm walking to it and there's just nothing fresh, then I'll just keep going past it until I find something. say you found something that looked dynamite in spring, and okay, I'm going to hunt it right away, opening week of bull season, and you get back there and there's nothing happening. It's kind of a wasted hunt because, yeah, that spot looked awesome in spring, but maybe that was just because they were in their late season, or the sign you did see was from the rut or something. So you always got to, I think you have to scout your way in every time, even if you know where you're going. It might not be off very much. It might be off quarter mile, but it can make a huge difference. But tracks, checking where acorns are dropping or where they're maybe cleaned up. I usually pay attention if I hear turkeys and stuff too, or blue jays, because they're usually always around some kind of food. Squirrels. That's like squirrels I pay attention to when I'm walking in too, because they're always grabbing stuff. I will, if I have to, if I'm walking back to a spot and it just doesn't look right and there's not that many options in that particular area to hunt, I'll back out, I'll get in the truck, and I'll just go somewhere else and just scout for the rest of the night. I think that's a big thing. Some guys will get to a spot and doesn't look good, so they end up just going home, and it's not making them better. It's not upping their odds at all.
Yeah, or they sit there and there's no fresh sign or hot sign, and that's kind of why I ask about it. And one of the reasons is because I've been hunting out of state, I don't know, 5 years now, and the big lesson that I've learned from hunting out of state is find the sign. Like, you got to find fresh sign or you might as well not even hunt, and I'd rather just keep walking, driving, glassing, whatever, until I find it, because you're just spinning your wheels if you're not.
Right, absolutely. And the other thing too, as far as like in-season scouting, if you're finding good sign and it's starting to look really good, slow down and stop for a minute and kind of look around the area. If you got reception in a smartphone, maybe pull up a map, because you don't want to go in too far. You're there right now. You're in good sign, and you might as well set up on it before you get too far in.
Yeah, that's sounds like you're not in any hurry when you're in the woods, right? I mean, maybe you are if you're only getting out for the last 45 minutes, but on an ideal day, are you taking your time getting in there then, and like you said, scouting your way in, checking stuff out?
For the most part, yeah. I mean, I'm usually burning back pretty good until I start getting to the areas where you're going to see the relevant sign. That's when I slow down big time, and then, all right, I got to cool down. I got to look around before I just go 100 miles an hour in here, then blow every deer out of here, because they might be right here and I'm going to go right past them, which I've done plenty of times.
I was just going to say, I bet you know that now because you've done it before. I know I have.
And I still do it, and it's going to happen. That's never going to go away. But you got to, every time you do that, anytime you fail that way, you got to think of it and not be too upset at yourself, but you got to take something away from it every time. Okay, I just ruined that, and I could have a slam dunk. Why did I ruin it? Why were they there? What could I have done differently?
Right. What did this sign look like 20 yards before I blew them out, and maybe look for that next time? Yeah, for sure. For sure.
And that's the thing too, like with the bigger bucks, I mean, you're seeing the rubs, so you're getting in there and you're seeing sign, and then it starts dwindling, but you're still heading in the same direction of where it was coming from. That's usually when I'll stop right then, because I know they're pretty dang close right now, where the bigger bucks around here don't leave that much sign around their bedding area. So I'll stop right there because I know they're close.
Right. And like you said, you already know a lot of times the bedding area that you're trying to get into. So it sounds like you're getting past what would be, the traditional sign, the rubs and the scrapes, and getting in between those and the bedding area.
Correct. Yep. I'd say about 90% of the time I know the area that I'm heading into. But that doesn't, just because I know it doesn't mean that the deer didn't shift a little bit.
And one other question I wanted to ask you is, are you ever just, I mean, I know you said earlier you're taking your bow with you, but are you ever just going out to scout an area? Let's say in this hypothetical scenario, you've been seeing this big buck, you know he's in the area, and you think you know where he's bedding. Are you ever going out just to scout around that bedding area? And if you are, how do you decide if you're scouting or if you're putting on too much pressure? You know, I think there's a fine line there. Like, how do you scout in that type of scenario without getting too much pressure on that deer?
Yeah, there is definitely a fine line. That's the biggest thing that I think is going to take the longest amount of time to figure out when you're pushing it too far. If I'm going strictly scouting, I probably still have at least a doe tag on me, if not my buck tag also. I still take my bow with me every time, even though I might be setting up 900 yards from where the deer are going to be. I'll still bring it just in case there's a fluke and something walks right past you at 20 yards and you feel like,
Yeah.
because I've had it happen, and ever since then, it does not matter. I am taking, even if I'm going to walk in 50 yards off the road, and you're probably not going to see a deer because it's CRP grass or whatever, I still take my bow.
That's a great tip, because I had a deer that I was after. I think it was 2014 or 2015, and this would be a quick story. But my girlfriend's dad, it was on their private property, and I'd seen it the year before and almost killed it. And we had, it was mostly me, had scouted all the property and the neighbors that would let me on to look around, and some public land in the area. And I found this where I thought this deer was bedding, and we didn't have a stand there. And when we found it, it was kind of downwind of a food plot, like 200 yards on this little ridge. And it made a lot of sense. And this was about the time I was getting into the hunting beast. I was like, oh yeah, this makes a lot of sense. When we're hunting in the food plot, he can smell us and he never comes out. And we'd only get him on camera in this one spot. Well, long story short, the stand we set up worked, and like the second or third day of season, my girlfriend's dad hit this buck high, and we weren't sure if it killed it or what. We looked for it for like 2 days, never did find it. And about 2 or 3 weeks later, I was on some public across the road from their place, but only maybe a mile and a half as the crow flies. And I was just going to set cameras on some scrape lines that I had found the year before. And I was kind of in a hurry, and it was the middle of the day, so I didn't take my bow. Long story short, I jumped that stupid buck that we were after, and it stood that 20 yards for about 45 seconds staring at me. And I was like, oh man, I'd kill for a bow right now. So I'm with you. Never leave your bow at home.
Ain't that something? It's like they know. They'll sit there and tease you if they know that you have no chance of killing them right now.
Yeah, it was pretty. That was an eye opener, and it was good because we got to close that chapter of the story. We knew that buck was alive still, and he looked just fine. So got a little silver lining, but kind of tough when that was my target buck for the year, to watch it stand there at 20 yards for close to a minute.
Yeah, but you picked up something on it. I mean, you knew he was still alive, and then you knew that. I probably should have brought my bow, even though I didn't plan on seeing them.
Yeah, it's just to close that story all the way out. A lot of good intel did me, because I went in the following week at like 4 a.m. to set up over the bed, and he was already there. I blew him out. Never seen him again that season.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah,
that sucks.
Yeah, what are you gonna do? It was a good learning lesson. So, anyways, Yeah, getting back to the in-season scouting, I always take your bow for sure. And I don't know. Do you have any final words you want to say on that before we move on?
Getting back to walking that fine line, if I don't really know what's going on and I'm sitting back, to whether it's observation set or I'm, like we just said, I am scouting from a long ways away, I try to be very careful until I have a pretty good idea what's going on, and then the next chance I get, I'm going to march right in there and either kill it or fail miserably.
Right.
So once I'm confident, or I think I know what's going on, then I'll go in right away at full steam ahead and see what happens. I won't work my way in a hunt at a time at that point.
Just diving all the way in.
Yep, go in right away.
Yeah, I like there's a saying, and I didn't make it up, but the worst decision is indecision. Get in there or don't get in there, and if you're getting in there, get after it. And like you said, if you mess it up, just on to the next spot.
Yep. And go with your gut. If you're going for it and something doesn't feel right, then maybe it's not. And if you feel like if I go in there tonight, I'm going to kill him, go for it. I did that last year with my bull buck. I actually texted Joe Rentmeester that morning. I said, I'm going to kill that buck tonight. He goes, all right, we'll go do it. Then at about 6, I don't remember, maybe 5:45, I texted him. I go, hey, I can just kill them. He goes, that's badass.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, you've had a lot of success, and you didn't initially have success. We talked about that. So one of the things I wanted to cover was, like, what combination or details are you noticing now, 10 years of success later, that you missed early? And like, if you could go back to 2010, what would you tell yourself then? Like, hey, here's the really important things to look for.
I would say I overlook all of the sign for the most part that I used to look for.
What do you mean? Rubs and scrapes, that kind of sign?
That kind of stuff. Or, oh, it's a hardwoods with oaks. That's where I got to hunt because that's where the deer are. And that's not true. Not on public land or most guys private. I mean, the stuff you watch on TV for the most part is a totally different style of hunting, and it just does not work for 90% of the guys that are out there. And I used to not understand. The biggest thing I didn't understand was how the wind works, because I would always, okay, the wind's blowing out of the west, I gotta hunt the east side of this property so the deer don't smell me. But a lot of times the deer weren't there because I didn't know it, but the wind wasn't in their favor, so they weren't comfortable being there. And it took me a long time to figure that out. I would say that's probably the biggest thing. Once I started figuring out the wind and how it acts and how the deer relate to it, that was a game changer.
Are you hunting a lot of like quartering winds or just off winds then, as opposed to stuff that's totally advantageous for you?
It is usually pretty dicey for the most part. I would say 3 out of 4 hunts, if I go 50 yards too far, the hunt's over before I'm even set up.
Yeah, no, I think both of those things are real good lessons. The sign thing, it's real counterintuitive too, especially when you're getting rolling. I mean, it was for me too, to say, hey, here's all the sign, but I shouldn't hunt there. Like Dan says, a lot of that's a night sign or stringing you along. I know Ryan talked about it too. So it's weird. You got to find those areas, and either by map scouting, boots on the ground, whatever it is, observation, where those deer are moving in the daylight, and that's not always or hardly ever where that sign's at.
Right. And that's tough because you get excited, you see this big rub, and then it might change your plan. And even though all right, if this rub's here, this buck is probably back in this bedding area, but then you're thinking, oh, there's this spot right here, and then you change your game plan and it throws you off. And yeah, you gotta take it into consideration. The sign's there, he's there, but you gotta overlook it. You gotta go to where he's gonna be.
Yeah, think about that security first, especially on public land.
Yep.
So this is something I want to talk about probably with every guest, because I think this is real important too, and you kind of already alluded to it, but how important is your mental attitude to your success?
It is huge, because that is pretty much the reason I quit for a while, because watching shows or talking to my buddies that hunt their private farms or whatever, and they're always getting deer and I wasn't, and it just totally ruined my mindset. And I was so down on myself, and this sucks, and I'm just going to quit doing it. And I see that a lot, and just talking to younger guys in the parking lots and stuff, and they get so discouraged. And it's kind of like, you got to have fun with it. You're going to mess up, but you got to learn something from it, but you got to stay positive. Okay, I didn't kill one tonight, but that's all right. I learned something. They're not here. They're not using this area. I'm going to get them tomorrow. if you got a bad attitude about not even just hunting, about anything, you're not going to perform to the best of your abilities. If you're going into a spot thinking, well, I don't know, I might see one, I might not, you're better off not even hunting it. You should just go to a spot where, yes, there's going to be one here, and I'm going to kill them, or I got a really good chance of even seeing one. Even if I just see them and not shoot them, that's huge. But, you know, you get into the season, now it's middle of October, you've hunted 30 days, and it does get tough to stay positive, but a lot of times that's when I'll just totally stop what I'm doing around home or most of the normal properties I hunt, and I'll just pick a spot out of the map a couple hours away and go try something new, something fresh.
Yeah, keep
Never
it fun.
been there before. Right. Keep it exciting. You know, I've never been here. This is fun. Maybe figure something out here. But you gotta stay positive. Bad attitude about anything, the game's over.
I agree, and that's why I want to bring it up because, I mean, especially it sounds like for you too, for me when I first started hunting and you see all these people being successful and you're like, what am I doing or what am I doing wrong? And you mentioned if you're in a spot that you're not confident about, go to one that you are. But if you haven't put the time in or if you're newer, you don't always have one of those spots. So you kind of got to believe in where you're at. And if that's not working out for whatever reason, don't go there again. Like, I think that's a mistake people make too. Like, oh, something's going to be different tomorrow. Well, probably not. Get out of that area and chalk it up to learning and go to another area you spring scouted or whatever and give that one a shot and move till you find them. And this leads me into a question. And then I wrote you some questions. We didn't have this on the list, but I think this is important too. So I want to bring this up. And I'm saying get out of that area, go to another one. What do you do once you found a deer? Let's say you get in and you know there's a good buck in the area, maybe even see him or whatever, but you don't kill him for whatever reason, or you see him from an observation stand. How many hunts are you given in an area? And I'm not talking about the same exact spot. Let's say 100 acres or whatever. How many hunts do you give an area when you know there's a good buck in there before you move on?
If I see a good buck, and the first thing I'm gonna take account is, why did I see him there, or why is this sign here, and pay close attention to the weather, especially the wind, because that can tell you a lot. And I generally don't hunt the same, say, 5-10 acre section more than once. It's different because it's different with every property and every bedding area. But if there's a good buck in a spot, I'm looking at maps, seeing, okay, if he's not here, he could be here, he could be there. I'm going to hunt every bedding area that he could possibly be using, and it might take a couple days, or depending on the wind, it might take a couple weeks. But just keep eliminating those spots, because every spot that doesn't work out, you're either getting closer or he's already gone. And I think you'll figure it out after a while, as long as you're scouting your way in and the sign dries up. Well, then it's kind of a thing telling you, well, he's probably gone, so I got to move on. And it is what it is.
Yeah, and that's what was going to be my follow-up questions. When do you throw in the towel, you specifically, but it sounds like when any sign of that big buck starts drying up or just goes away totally, huh?
Yeah, usually. Or it's happened twice now where the one I was chasing, I felt like I was getting closer. You got hit by a car, or you hear rumors of one got poached in the area and the sign's drying up, or not even poached. Oh yeah, someone shot a dandy back here. Well, when someone says a dandy too, like we were saying about spread earlier, I take it with a grain of salt, because to some people, 110-inch buck is a giant, and it could be to a lot of people because they've never seen one that big. But I'm always kind of thinking, well, is it the one I was after or not? I'm still gonna go in there to hopefully confirm any suspicion that he's gone or dead or whatever.
Right. Yeah, it's not always easy to tell, especially. I mean, that's one of the tough parts. There's a lot of tough parts of public land is maybe you're chasing a ghost, like you said. That deer either moved out, got killed, got hit, whatever, and it's not
Right.
always easy to tell that he's not in the area anymore. And sometimes until it's really obvious, like you haven't seen that deer in 3 months or whatever.
No, for sure. And actually, one of the bucks I killed one year, I had been seeing him in a certain area and saw him a couple times, couldn't kill him. And this was well before the rut. And 2 weeks later, he got shot a mile and a half away. Something pushed him out, and he just went to the next spot where he's either he just kept going or he's been there before and knew he could get away from any danger. But so yeah, like you said, it's tough to keep track of them.
That's why I'm not somebody that chases a specific deer normally, because I think that's one of the
Right.
biggest issues with that, especially on public. You just too many variables that are out of your control there.
Yeah, that's why I kind of got out of trail cameras too, because it was killing me because I was just going after these ones instead of doing what I do now and just keep hitting different spots until something shows up. Otherwise, you get hung up on this one buck and you're burning a lot of time.
Yeah, and there's something, I mean, at least to me, there's something fun about seeing a buck show up that you don't have a trail camera picture of, or maybe you never glassed, and it's a nice surprise. It's something fun about that for sure too.
Yeah, I would agree 100% with that.
Well, hey, last question here. We're getting into the 2 hour mark, I think. I'm a big proponent of setting goals, and not just with deer hunting, probably every area of my life. And I think it's important. Do you set any goals for yourself going into a season? And I'm not just talking about like inches of antlers, it could be anything. And if so, what do you consider when setting your goals? And do you have any goals for 2020?
Yeah, for sure. Some years it's I want to shoot 165 incher, so that's all I'm going to focus on. Some years it's I want to shoot one in a different county on a different type of terrain. I did. I am mostly a cattail marsh hunter, but I do like dipping into some other kind of more farmland stuff, CPR or CRP grass and stalking kind. That's why out west really excites me and why I want to get out there more. I like the spot and stalk aspect of hunting, but usually my main goal every year is to shoot a mature buck, and it doesn't have to be a Boone and Crockett buck. Like the main one I've gotten on recently here, he looks like an old deer, and he looks like the one in the story we were talking about at the beginning, where I think he's over 5 years old. He might go 145 inches, but he's just an old mature deer that has made it all these years. And to me, shooting an older buck that might not score much means more, just because it's a harder animal to get a hold of.
Yeah, he's eluded a lot of other hunters for 5 years, so a big challenge there.
Right. And another goal I would say for this year. So I have never hunted anything out of state my entire life till last year. I went. Last year I was going to be 30, so it's about time I start doing different stuff. I went to Canada on a bear hunting trip. I went to Colorado elk hunting, that was the most awesome thing I've ever done. I wasn't expecting to even shoot one, let alone see good bulls, and I shot one, and that was awesome. Came back home, and I ended up shooting my Wisconsin bull buck, and then I had some time to kill between then and our gun season. So a Friday on my way home from work, I just got around, thought in my head, screw it, I'm going to go to Missouri and bow hunt. Never been there, never looked at a map. I'm just going to go with something to do. And it was a lot of fun. I honestly didn't even look at a map till I was midway through Iowa trying to get a hold of Jake Hipsman from the hunting public to see if I could crash at their house that night, which I ended up doing.
That's awesome.
It was fun. I actually almost killed a really nice 9-pointer that first morning. Just from I was looking at maps and yeah, this looks all right. It's more hill country, which I don't have much experience in, but I read up on it a lot and watch videos. I've read a couple books, and it was fun. And I ended up going back the next weekend too, and I had multiple opportunities. It just, I could never get a shot at a couple different bucks. Nothing huge, but I would have been happy as heck with them. So another main goal this year is to kill one out of state for sure.
Are you heading back to Missouri, or do you got tags for any other states?
I think I am for sure going to head to Missouri. I see. I want to do this stuff, but I don't. I just think, I want to go to Nebraska or North Dakota. I get that in my mind without even looking at what it takes to get a tag. So who knows? I mean, I'll look around and see where I can get a tag and maybe end up doing it, because I had a blast last year. I hunted so many different spots, and usually my whole season is right here, which is still fun. I mean, that's what I do, but it takes some excitement out of it when you're just pounding the same terrains and same couple areas. So I definitely want to travel more and hunt a more diverse array of properties and terrain.
Yeah, if you wanna to get into the spot and stock stuff, I mean, I've never hunted Nebraska, but I have hunted Kansas, South Dakota, North Dakota, and Montana now, and any of those are going to give you a good opportunity. Well, no, South Dakota is a little different now, but North Dakota you can still buy a tag.
I might have to do that.
North Dakota you can buy a tag over the counter still. I mean, or mail in and they mail it to you, so you got to get it like a little bit before you want to hunt. Usually takes like a week to 10 days to show up. And then South Dakota you can buy one, but you have to put in like April, so that's over with. And Montana and Kansas are both draws, but they're usually like no points or 1 point draw for most of the areas. So if you want to get into that, hunting the plains is a blast, man. Coming from Michigan, where it's mostly farm ground or ag or kind of big woods, some swamps, going out to the plains, it's a totally different experience. And those states are just such lower pressure, I imagine, compared to Wisconsin too, like calling and decoying, and the things you see on TV will even work on public land there.
Right.
So it makes it a lot of fun, just a real different experience. So if that's something you're looking to get into, I'd definitely recommend it.
Yeah, I will say I have never had success rattling. I've brought some in with a grunt tube. Usually, during the run, I'll have a grunt tube on me, but there's so much pressure in this state. It probably not as much as by you were in Michigan, but there's a lot of fun stuff I'd like to do, even decoys and stuff, where I know guys have success out west with it, and it's a whole new element it's something fresh that would make it pretty fun.
Yeah, man, like I said, I definitely encourage you to look into it for if you can't do it this year. I mean, it sounds like you can go to Missouri still, but you want to get to some of those western states, definitely look into it for next year and give it a whirl, because it's a blast. And coming from even a state like Michigan or Wisconsin, where you got quite a bit of pressure, the difference in the hunting pressure, especially during bow season, will blow your mind. You'll be like, where's everybody at?
Yeah, it sounds fun.
Well, hey, I appreciate you coming on and having a chat with me today. It was good times. I definitely learned a few things, and I'm sure people listening will too. If you got any last words before we close her off here?
Yeah, I had fun too. Tell a quick story about, and it kind of tells how I ground hunt, is when I shot my booner. It was a spot I was working about 2 hours from home, and I knew this job site was going to be a couple years long. So I'm like, well, I might as well find something down that way to scout and potentially hunt on a Friday if I drive myself. So I found this spot. It was pretty much an island, not a classic island that you would see in the middle of cattails, but it was some high ground with trees and stuff, and it looked perfect. Everything looked perfect about it. This island was maybe 30 yards wide by 80 yards long, and I knew I needed a certain wind to get in there. That's not very common, and I pretty much just waited all fall for that right wind, and it finally came. And the top part of the island, or I guess the crest of it, is pretty bare. There was not much grass. I had to be careful because if there was a buck on this thing, he was almost going to be able to see anything and hear anything. And the wind was really strong that day, which was perfect. And by the time I got onto the island, I had to go about 40 yards total to set up. And I would say, I know I timed it, and I'd have to look at my GoPro footage. It took me almost 45 minutes to close those 40 yards because I literally was on my hands and knees waiting for a blue jay to help make some extra noise or a plane going over just to cover noise. And I did not want to move fast because if there was one there, if he picked his head up, he'd see me immediately. And I pretty much, that's what I did. And my ambush setup was hiding behind this den tree with some raccoons in it. And long story short, it was getting about prime time, and I could hear the coons in this tree are waking up. They're gonna come. The holes are at the bottom of the tree. They're gonna crawl right in my lap and freak out. And they ended up not. I don't know if they could smell me or something, but sure as shoot, that buck was there. He was 25 yards from where I set up, and I watched him stand up and grow a couple trees and walk right in and I shot him. I guess I just want to say that's how stealthy you got to be. Just because you don't have a stand and everything doesn't mean that you can just barrel your way in there. I mean, you still got to take everything into account, but it's pretty exciting when they're right up in your face like that.
That's a great story because I feel like, especially in the modern world, people don't necessarily hunt. And what I mean by that is like, you're out there for fun. You're not out there like you're trying to survive. And if you were out there like you're trying to survive, you'd do a lot of things different. Like you would crawl on your hands and knees, and you would take an hour to get in there.
Right.
And it also illustrates confidence, right? Like, I don't know if you'd ever seen this deer before, but probably not. But you had good reason to believe that was the area you needed to be in to see a big one. So you had the confidence going in there to do the things right that you needed to do, instead of, well, maybe there's one in here and I don't need to be that quiet, or I can just walk in there and like you said, would have blown it before you ever got started.
Yep, for sure. I scouted it one day 6-7 months before that, and that was my first time ever in there. I didn't know what to expect, but the sign was right.
And we shot a booner. That's crazy.
Yep, on a Sunday, 2 hours from home, and we got him back home at like 3:30 in the morning. I took an hour nap and drove all the way back there for work that Monday.
Oh, geez. What time of the year was that?
I think it was like October 22nd. My least favorite time of the year is the rut, and I do shoot most of my bucks before like the pre-rut really gets going.
So you've got most of your bucks, say, before like October 25th then?
Yeah, right in that area.
Interesting. Yeah, I know a lot of guys, a lot of big buck slayers swear by those last 2 weeks of October. You know, while they're still on somewhat of a pattern and haven't totally disappeared chasing does.
Yep, for sure.
Well, all right, man. Hey, thanks again. Like I said, definitely learned a lot from talking to you, and good luck this season. I'll be following along with your adventures. You'll have to get on the beast a little bit and post up how things are going.
Right on. Good luck to you. Thanks for having me.
All right. Take care, Jordan.
All righty. Bye.